Hey, welcome, grade 9. Today we are going to be talking about consumers and consumerism. Uh, Generally speaking, this is going to look at some of the things that influence us as consumers. We'll connect back to your Forceburg competition videos as kind of the last thing we do as we work through this as well. So the first thing we need to know is that consumers are people who use the goods and services produced to satisfy the needs and wants. It's when you go shopping, when you buy stuff. Our economy, our mixed economy, and the American market economy, and market and mixed economies around the world rely on consumers. Arguably, too, command economies do, although not in the same way. Consumers, though, in mixed market economies have sovereignty. That means they control their own destiny. They choose between producers, they choose between retailers, and buy the products that they want. And the decisions they're going to make are perhaps they want the best quality, they want the best service, they want the lowest price. And ultimately, the prices are set through a negotiation between producers and consumers. Now, it's not a direct negotiation. I'm not sitting down at the table, across from the bookmaker or whatever. But that process of supply and demand that we've learned about is the very process of this complex interaction intertangled web. So that's kind of the rundown of consumers. But basically, you're all consumers the moment you buy something. That's kind of the short of it. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that shape how we choose to interact with the market. One of the things that we kind of first link is our identity. Okay. And our identity comes in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. Our identity is inspired by many, many things, whether it's the media, whether it's our family, our school, our community. All of these things will swirl together to form our identity. And our clothing often helps us get a sense of our identity. We're a rural school. I think if we dropped the lot of you in, the middle of West Island College in Calgary, they might figure out you don't necessarily belong the same way. It's not that you couldn't fit in, but if I dropped you there right now, it would be clear that you are not the same as the people there. So our clothing often reveals a lot about us. Our clothing often is shaped on our identity and shapes our identity. So it's a kind of a two-way street that occurs. And we need to think about, what influence is us when we buy something. And if we think about our clothing, well, there's all sorts of things. A lot of you right now, when this video is being recorded, are going to be out in the fields getting ready for seeding. You're going to be calving. There's all sorts of work that you will be doing. So a lot of your clothing is going to be tied to, durability, but also just kind of farm culture and utility. I always joke that in Canada, we wear way more plaid than the rest of the world. That's not a farmer thing, it's kind of a lumberjack thing. But if you talk to people from other countries, they will notice that, yeah, we tend to have a lot more plaid than any other place in the world. That's a cultural thing. So our identity is going to shape what we buy, and it's going to influence those decisions. So if we look, there's going to be four students here. This first guy, Jordan, he is all about conformity. He wants to buy only the hottest brands. And, he argues that those brand names are brand names for a reason. They are reliable. There's going to be a good experience. I often talk about my love of Adidas, right? I will buy pretty much anything with the Adidas logo on it because I so trust that company compared to other manufacturers of athletics goods. You don't see me wearing a lot of Nike stuff For instance, they're a brand name, but I don't have any loyalty to them in the same way I do Adidas. Now, Tao here says she's influenced by the opinions of friends and family, but she doesn't like to conform. She wants to be original. We have a couple of you in our class that I would say this is a good summary of. You intentionally non-conform, and that's a fine as well. But Tao goes on to say that, you know what, the product still needs to be a good quality and a good price. So that's good to weigh in. If we look at Mackenzie here, Mackenzie talks about going for food. It's just 100% the foods he likes. You know, if I like it, I'll buy it. There's some Ariana Grande Seven Rings kind of throwdown. But when he's buying clothes, he wants to get what's popular, and he'll save up if he has to get that as well. And then Megan, no relation, I promise. She talks about brand names, but also the appeal of if a celebrity, you know, is advertising something. Some of you for your colored ad stuff, I think, yeah, one of you sent me a Connor McDavid ad. You know, that's in Alberta. If Connor McDavid is advertising something, that is going to sell. Just is. It will around the world, but certainly in Alberta, right? That's going to have a huge influence there also. So ultimately, I do just want you to pause and think. You can kind of pause the video right here, right now, and think about these questions. Just pause and consider for a moment, you know, are any of those views lined up with your own? And do any of the products that you purchase or consume, do any of them define who you are? Give it a pause and consider that. Hey, welcome back from that pause. We are going to take a look now at the health and safety. And this always kind of makes me chuckle because if we're talking about true market economies, which again, Canada is not a market economy by any stretch, we're a mixed economy that has some left-leaning tendencies. But health and safety is usually one of the first things that is permissible within a market economy, allowing government intervention. And I always go back. I really like the agricultural examples from like the late 1800s, early 1900s, where, you know, farm kind of products, animal products could be literally rotting, and people were allowed to sell it. With eggs, they dipped them in formaldehyde. So they weren't visibly rotten when they sold, although you would think people would notice the whiff of formaldehyde. I guess not. Also, you know, the old adage of a snake oil salesman, these people that would, you know, create these random concoctions that would claim they could cure anything and everything, but often it was just like loaded with cocaine and things like that. So ultimately, these were some of the first things that we started regulating. Meat packing plants, like butchers, that type of thing, were regulated fairly early as well. We didn't want rancid meat. And so that's an example of the type of thing that we're thinking of as well. As well, you could imagine, you know, something like cigarettes. We know that cigarettes are linked to cancer and heart disease. We are strongly suggesting that newer tobacco and nicotine products like vaping are probably going to have those links once we've had time to study them. So there's warnings for these, but adults still can buy these goods. Now, some governments in Canada and around the world have banned products and made them unavailable to consumers. Now, we'll go through a couple of school-based examples here. This one is a junk food ban from Edmonton School Board. Our school division sort of kind of has a ban like this, but it really does seem like it's school discretion. So, for instance, we have a deal with our vending machine contractor that if we don't like something in the vending machine, we can ixnay it. So you'll notice that our vending machine doesn't have the full range of like chips and chocolate bars. There are some things that are removed from it as well. When I was living in Lethbridge, I lived by a junior high school. It was like a block away from where I lived. I could see it quite literally from my doorstep. And that school, and perhaps that division, I would suspect it was a division, actually was banning things like pop entirely. You couldn't have it at school, it wasn't allowed through the door kind of thing. And I remember seeing this very enterprising junior high kid who would like fill his backpack with pop and he would like set up a little shop on the sidewalk across the street, which is pretty close to my house. And kids at their breaks would like come out, buy the pop from him, drink it like on the other side of the sidewalk, and then go back to the school. It was hilarious. So sometimes those decisions aren't always the most successful, even though they're well intentioned. We know that excess sugar, salt, these things are often tied to things like obesity and diabetes, so worth discussing. Now, in the news quite recently has been another ban of an item that's been controversial, particularly in Alberta, and that was the Prime Minister, through an order in council, banning the sale of certain classes of assault style guns. Uh, I don't really need your views on that. It's people have strong opinions when guns are discussed, and regardless of where you stand on that, that's an example of a government claiming health and safety is its reason for banning a product. Uh, Trans fats, okay, that one's pretty clear. Sugar, New York City bans soda of certain sizes, um, because the sizes of pop containers in the United States are just excessive to begin with. Again, really at a health angle. And in the US and Canada, we have product labeling laws that require the ingredients in food and cosmetics to be listed. Uh, Things like seat belts can be mandatory or compulsory, as our road signs say. So there's all sorts of things like that that we can regulate to ensure safety. And then you will make your decisions based on that safety knowledge, right? I mean, some of you are still going to choose to buy excessively large pop. Some of you may choose to purchase tobacco products when you're 18. Those will be your choices. The government won't completely control those except when they ban it, like the assault style weapons. All right, so let's move past that. Jobs are also another factor that influences what we choose to purchase. So let's take the idea of a ballpoint pen for just a moment. And this is a thought exercise that goes back to an economist, a thinker by the name of Milton Friedman. You'll learn about him in grades 10 and in grade 12. But he used the analogy of a pencil. The book has taken a pen to give you some different illustrations. And so when we look at all of the different steps along the way of making a pen, we know that there are plastics involved in that pen, which means chemists were involved, petrochemical engineers, manager support staff. There's also the people to extract those petrochemicals. We know the metal aspects had jobs created for mine workers. We know that at some point there was an assembly line. There was work done to make the ink. Someone had to ship those pens. There were store salespeople, marketers. Of course, there were support staff, custodial staff, managers at every step of the way as well. So we understand that there's this theory that the more consumers spend, the better it is for an economy, a very market oriented approach. I want to be clear. And when we see that, we can really get a taste of all the ripple effect, that invisible hand that is guiding decisions every step of the way. Now, Milton Friedman, just a preview of grade 10 and grade 12 for you, he would also say that the magical thing about all of this is that no one ever, said, "Hey, mine workers, you need to go mine whatever because we're making pens." There was no one authority guiding this whole process. This was a whole bunch of individual actions that, through mutual interest, came together. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's very much so high school philosophy of economics. Let's stick to the practical stuff here. Now, I do want to give you a different example about jobs because some of you might actually do the same thing. A couple of years ago, Heinz moved its production of its ketchup and stopped using Canadian tomatoes, and they moved to the United States. At the same time, Leamington, Ontario, French's, the mustard maker, said, "Hey, we'll start making ketchup and use Canadian tomatoes." So for me personally, I only will purchase French's ketchup now as a way of supporting, the job creation they did in this country, and as a way of punishing Heinz. So I personally take an action to try and influence the behavior of corporations. And I'm not the only person that does that, right? I'm more likely to buy Canadian than I will from other places. And many people would agree with that. Certainly, US President Donald Trump would promote that thinking for people in his own country. All right. So again, some questions to consider, but I won't linger too much on these. All right. The environment is increasingly a factor that we are seeing people consider when they choose to buy things. People now are after what some people call triple bottom line. They want to see businesses that care about people, planets, and profits, not just profits. And so, because of this, consumers are much more in touch with, things that affect the air quality, the water quality. Are you dumping toxic chemicals? What are your emissions like? There are actually organizations that rank different companies based on how environmentally friendly they are. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds on this. I don't want to open this up for debate. This is just something that people do and they consider, right? And so if we want to go back to the pen example, we can look at, maybe the packaging is excessive. Packaging is a third of the waste of North American consumers. Maybe we're not huge fans of plastic because it releases formaldehyde, that stuff that we dipped the eggs in so people didn't know they were rotten. You know what? The ink, the metals, there might be some environmental impacts there and how we produce those things, including things like creating acid rain. So we might consider our purchases. You might choose a more eco-friendly product. You might completely replace that product, choose only to type. So there's all sorts of things. Now, the way that I see this most often is the energy ratings on appliances, where it tells you kind of how much this product will cost you each year in power. Now, some of you may choose to use that information from a cost basis and be like, "Oh, this one costs me $10 a year, this one costs me 40. I'm going to pick the one that costs me less." But others might not even really consider that and go, "Yeah, I want the one that's more energy efficient because that's what's right for the environment." Environmentally friendly household cleaners. I wash my truck by hand every spring a few times, and I only use stuff that can naturally kind of go into the drain water and not pollute it. So I do a lot of research. It does mean I spend a little more money though, and that's a trade-off I'm willing to make as well. Now, people are always going to target, the oil sands in Alberta and open pit mines, and it's hard to combat that because when you look at something like this is an open pit mine in the United States. That is a giant hole. It's hard not to say that there is an environmental impact on these things. Now, it's a value judgment. Are we willing to allow some of this on Earth to get everything that we want? Right? And at what point is the tipping point? Certainly, Canada has mines that are like this. And so it's really a value judgment. I'm not here to make that judgment. But mines like this represent, those questions of use of land, labor, and capital we talked about before. All right. So as we go, a lot of people, are going to buy environmentally friendly products. Others are going to ignore that. Really, truly, to each their own. All right, let's go on to our last one because this is what your ads were all about. This is marketing. Ads, etc., are going to drive us all the time. Packaging, advertising, all of it is the system, the methods used to convince you to buy a product, right? All of this is going to affect your decision making. So if you think about, a trip to West Edmonton Mall, we don't need to do the food example here, but a trip to West Ed, I always kind of use as my default example for marketing because you're just inundated. Everywhere you turn, there's new things to buy. I feel shell shocked when I walk into West Ed because I'm like, oh boy, it's very overwhelming, at least for me. And so how, you know, like I only spend, let's say I'm there for 3 hours. There's no way I'm seeing every product in that mall in 3 hours. So how am I convinced to go through the door of one of the thousands or hundreds or however many stores are in West Ed? Well, marketing is going to be one of the things that drives that. Okay. Now, of course, we've looked at some ads through the marketplace. You've made it, but it is worth noting that we have something called the Competition Act that says you can't make false or misleading claims about other products. Okay, so you can't lie. That will get you into trouble as well. All right. There are a few different techniques that are offered to kind of convince you. The bandwagon effect is a way of convincing you to buy a product because everybody else is. Uh, this is one of the most common types of ads that we see. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend. We are the number one most trusted brand in Canada. Those types of ads are bandwagon effect. Emotional appeal, one of our videos did very well with a three-legged dog. But I even think about like Save the Children, those types of things. They get the Sarah McLachlan music playing, the little puppy dog on the screen. All of that is that emotional appeal. Now, emotional appeal isn't just always sadness. They can try to create like overwhelming joy. Ellen DeGeneres or Oprah giving out a prize to, a worthy family. WestJet, bring people home at Christmas. They can even try to get you angry, although it doesn't usually help sell. It's very niche products that anger sells for, but it's out there as well. Glittering generalities and weasel words. This is when they promise everything, but really deliver nothing. A miracle cure. That's a glittering generality. Weasel words are when they say something, but then they kind of back out of it. Plain folks appeal. is meant to kind of go for people that just want value. So instead of prestige, they're just going to make it look like ordinary Joes use the product. So plain folks appeal only works for some products. Luxury appeal works for others. I mean, you're not going to sell a Rolex using plain folks appeal. No average Joe on the street is wearing a Rolly. Sorry, it's not going to happen. And those luxury brands don't want plain folks. But many things do. Walmart is going to try to push the plain folks appeal. We're the place people go. It's pretty common to see testimonials. It could be a celebrity endorsement. It could be, again, that 4 out of 5 dentists or doctors or whatever. And sometimes, you know, we see strange connections. We see, celebrities that have no credibility whatsoever about the product being promoted, but we're like, okay, cool, I guess. If Kim Kardashian is advertising, I don't know, like ladders or something like that for home hardware, we would laugh, I think, and then wonder why Mike Combs or Scott McGillivray aren't the ones, advertising the ladder. Scientific appeal, we really like stats and numbers as consumers. So if we see, that there's a year over year improvement to your health, or it reduces something by X%, it's 2 times more effective than the competitor. We really do like seeing those numbers. And of course, when in doubt, double up. A lot of ad agencies are going to combine these and other techniques to get you purchasing. All right, so ultimately, marketing is our final thing that influences consumer behavior. I hope that you all know how that works because many of you have made ads now. Consider these questions and have yourself a great day.